You're listening to the Downeast Mike podcast, the quirky little podcast from Maine. And now, your host, Downeast Mike.
Why, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to you. This is Downeast Mike, coming to you live from down east, Maine, way down east. It is a beautiful fall day, shaping up to be a beautiful fall day here in Maine, and we're so glad to be out here in the midst of all the foliage. It's almost at peak color, and maybe it's one of those situations where you need to get closer to the ground if it's not bright enough, because if you're down there looking up at the blue sky, you see all those sugar maples just looking brilliant red across the field. Maybe you're going to go outside and watch some sporting event today, or go for a hike in the woods, but it's a great time to be in Maine and to be outdoors. Although, if you were going to go camping this week, and I know it's a popular camping weekend, but it's supposed to get really cold overnight and down way below frost level. So camping might not be on the smart list if you're thinking about doing that. Just about anything else, of course, makes sense. Well, if you're new to the Downeast Mike podcast, what we do here is we look at things of old and things of new, and we review that things haven't changed too much, and it's somewhat reassuring to know that things go along just as they are. This is episode number 60, news and commentary for Saturday, October 8th, 2022. Our motto is, some of this is whimsy, some of it's true, and the interpretation of it all is entirely up to you. We are moving along at a great clip, aren't we? We're cruising right along. In today's episode, we have CMP Raises Rates. That's from 1976. The president says the U.S. will never concede to Russia. That was from 1976 on this day. The balloon that almost made it from Maine to Spain, 1976, and we'll do a deep dive on that balloon story. It's quite interesting. We have the bad ad roundup from 1956. Actually, quite a lot of interesting items in the ad roundup. And we've returned with Maine's Mammal of the Moment. There were only 260 or so mammals in Maine, so we have to kind of stretch them out unless we want the podcast to end suddenly, and we probably don't want that to happen now, do we? Let's look at the international headlines. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a massive explosion on Crimea's Kerch Bridge, the Russian state media reports. And you see a picture of the bridge with black smoke billowing up, and I guess it was a truck bomb. And so that was That's a thing that's happening. Zelensky, he's always full of good news. Russia's beginning to prepare the society to launch a nuclear attack, he says. What else? North Korea says the U.S. aircraft carrier's presence is worrisome. I think North Korea's Navy is like a couple of inflatable boats, isn't it? So seeing an aircraft carrier offshore would be worrisome. Nikki Haley says Biden's warning of Armageddon is gaslighting instead of keeping people calm. Subway rider dies on New York subway. A rookie cop was fired for shooting a cheeseburger-eating teen. And what else do we have the Tesla competitor Rivian is recalling this is a great headline, recalls nearly almost all of its vehicles. Right much? We're acting with urgency and caution. They've got some sort of steering mechanism problem with it. Anna Sorokin is out of jail. That's important. New York City declares an emergency over the migrant crisis. And that's about it for international headlines. It just keeps getting grimmer. Let's look at, see if there's any main headlines of note that we want to relate to you. Let's see. Maine has costliest COVID telehealth screenings, the national survey says. Well, of course they do. Maine CDC director urges people to get updated bivalent booster as COVID-19 hospitalizations rise. Maine Republicans are preparing for final push to Election Day. If you're here in Maine, The election day ads will just drive you right out of the room on the TV. They're just going on. Donald Trump Jr. shoots a moose on hunt in Maine. Maine leaders want to defund California aquarium, calling for lobster boycott to protect whales. I can't figure that one out. Make the final frontier your final resting place with these Maine companies' help. And there's a company up in northern Maine that wants to send your ashes into space. My problem is what happens when those ashes all come down? Like, where do they end up? Or does anybody think about that sort of thing? How high up do those ashes go? All right, let's get right to the news actually, we have a word of the day today. Phantasmagoria. We'll try that again. Phantasmagoria. There we are. Phantasmagoria. An exhibition of optical effects and illusions, a constantly shifting, complex succession of things seen or imagined, a bizarre or fantastic combination, collection, or assemblage. What an interesting word, phantasmagoria. There's a shortened version of it. An example of phantasmagoria in a sentence: he saw a phantasmagoria of shadowy creatures through the fog. Not sure why this word became the word of the day. We must have run into it somewhere. It was first known in 1802 in print, borrowed from the French phantasmagorie. It's a theatrical show showing magic lanterns in a darkened performance space to suggest supernatural phenomenon. Used by the magician Paul Philidor in 1829. They said he's of uncertain nationality. That's like me. Apparently first used in an announcement of a performance in a Parisian journal in 1792. Phantasmagorica. That's our word of the day. I don't know if you're going to be able to apply it today, but there it is. On this day in 1976, Central Maine Power was raising their rates, and that's the basic charge would be 13% increase to $3.40 from $3 a month. Those were the good old days, actually. They had improved that price increase. Also on this day in 1976, President Ford sought to take the political sting out of his statement that the Soviet Union does not dominate Eastern Europe by declaring Thursday that the U.S. never will concede Russian control of the region. So things have not changed too much there. Carter was in Salt Lake City. He escalated the dispute born of Ford's flat statement in campaign debate when he said that there is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe. And Ford delivered what amounted to a clarification of the statement without conceding that he was doing so. He told 15,000 people at the University of Southern California that the U.S. firmly supports the aspirations for independence of the nations of Eastern Europe. The U.S. will never concede, has never conceded, and never will concede their domination by the Soviet Union. Let's talk about the balloonist who went from Milbridge, Maine, tried to make it across to Spain. In 1976, on this day, veteran balloonist Edward Yost, he was carried along by western breezes under his helium-filled balloon. He was reported on this day, actually, to be about halfway across the Atlantic Ocean on his attempt to become the first man to successfully cross the ocean in a balloon. In fact, the reported position early in the evening indicated Yost was more than halfway across the ocean. He was in voice communication with Ireland, sources at the Washington, D.C. tracking station said Thursday evening. He had a 30-knot wind pushing him. They have a picture of the balloon drawn out on a map about midway. In one of the local stories that they had done, I guess it's just before he left, the launch preparation and takeoff of Ed Yost's Silver Fox balloon on Tuesday afternoon at Millbridge, Maine. It drew airborne and waterborne spectators as well as a special gift of food of a kind which Yost had said would get him to Europe. Shortly after 5 p.m., when Yost's gassed envelope was being filled with helium and slowly rising vertically over his gondola, a twin-engine Beech 99 aircraft began circling Baldwin Head, the site of his takeoff. Yost called the plane's pilot from his balloon gondola, which was still earthbound. "Are you looking for us?" 10-4, said the pilot. His passenger, who had boarded the chartered aircraft an hour earlier near Auburndale, Mass., was Mrs. Donald C. Jewett, whose Baldwin Head property was the actual site of Yost's balloon, while Yost and his crew prepared for the Atlantic balloon flight. The pilot landed about 15 miles away, and then they drove over to meet him and watch the final stages of his preparation for his flight. So this is Millbridge that they're leaving. A bunch of lobster boats were out in the harbor. They were watching him. And he took aboard a gift of food minutes before liftoff. 12 hard-boiled eggs in a blue plastic carton. Not that anybody was being cheap about it. Yost had described the food supply for his expedition as not dehydrated food or astronaut food, but ordinary grocery store stuff, canned soup, and meat. But last Saturday evening in an interview, Yost had said that 12 hard-boiled eggs would see him to Europe. Newsreader Carl Watson, who is a retired Maine DOT employee who lives on Main Street in Millbridge, was pleased to help the Yost venture, which Watson firmly believes will succeed. It was he, Watson told the News Thursday, who cooked the eggs that will get Ed Yost to Europe. Hard-boiled eggs. And then we looked into that a little bit further because we wanted to know the story. We found a write-up about it. It was weird, unpredictable, disappointing, but the climax of Ed Yost's attempt was entirely in keeping with the tradition of an attempted transatlantic crossing. There was Yost in his 80-foot-high helium-filled balloon gently descending to the sea, 200 nautical miles east of the Azores, having drifted 2,500 miles in 107 hours, while beneath him a Russian ship was trying to outrace a West German freighter and a Portuguese Coast Guard ship to make the rescue. Why this almost comic finish to Yost's grand adventure? Purely a matter of economics. After another Russian ship picked up Carl Thomas when he ditched in the North Atlantic earlier this summer, Thomas reportedly received a bill for $100,000. So they're all racing to pick him up because they want to make money on it. 48 hours after the Elizabeth Bolton rescued Yost and his wallet from the fast-closing Russians, they charged him $5,000 for the ride. He waved a final goodbye to his West German rescuers, struck a heroic pose at the tiller, and steered his red and white gondola, which was being towed by a motor launch, into the harbor beneath the towering Rock of Gibraltar. The sun was bright, the wind was fresh, and the boxy little catamaran danced jauntily over the waves. Such was the final last mile of the most successful failure in the history of long-distance ballooning. In all, Yost broke 8 world records in 4 ballooning categories, including all-class endurance and distance records that had stood for more than 60 years, and he did it at low altitude in an open gondola without help from the jet stream. And we have some more on this. At the time, Yost was 57 years old. He was the holder of some 20 balloon-related patents. He was the builder of balloons used in films like The Great Bank Robbery and The Great Race, and he was a veteran of high-altitude test flights for NASA and the armed services. He had the balloon was a 60,000 cubic foot balloon dubbed the Silver Fox, patterned after heavy-duty balloons used in the North Woods to haul timber down the mountainsides. Have you seen that before, where they use balloons to pull the lumber down out of the mountains? It's pretty fascinating that they would do it that way. He had a catamaran-style buoyant gondola, which is pretty smart when you think about it, out there on the water. And in it, he had food, foul weather gear, automatic trim adjusting equipment, sleeping bags, water, cameras, 2 stoves, and ballast. And his ballast was 250 pounds of BB shot in 5-pound bags, another 58 pounds of sand in small bags, and approximately 20 grapefruit-sized rocks picked up at the last minute from the shore near Millbridge, Maine. Almost every item on board had been marked to its weight, one exception being a toy mouse given to him by a Millbridge youngster shortly before takeoff. Estimated cost was about $60,000. And what else do we have on that one? Let's dig just a little bit more into this story here. Across the Atlantic, he said, one day I actually went backward. All I could do was sit there and watch it happen. And in fact, he did more than just sit there. It's not a comfortable ride, he said. You work all the time. You can't go to sleep for long. Even when I did sleep, I'd set the alarm clock for an hour, and an hour would go by and I'd wake up, check the instruments, go back to sleep for another hour. There's always something to do. I bet it was pretty quiet, though. The first thing I did in the morning was wind the barograph, then check the ballast supply, then get everything set up and laid out for the next evening's sunset, which was when the ballast had to be released to counteract lost lift. At about 10 or 11 o'clock, I'd try to make radio contact. At noon, I'd do a sun shot with a sextant to figure out where I was. I just kept working all the time. One night, the temperature dropped to 18 degrees. During the day, however, he wore normal street clothing. In the day, it's pretty warm. You're in a calm all the time. Since you're being carried by the wind, there's no relative wind, and the sun is very strong at that altitude. His diet during the voyage consisted mainly of canned food and fruit juice. He heated water for coffee only once before the stoves went over the side to decrease ballast. We made a bad mistake when we brought the balloon from South Dakota to Maine, he says. We put a bunch of mothballs in the balloon box to keep the mice out. Then we put my plastic water bottles on top of the balloon and closed the box. The water tasted like mothballs all the way across. I didn't drink much water. So eventually it became clear he had to abandon the flight. He ditched at about 9 a.m. on Sunday, October 10th, 1976. We decided on Saturday afternoon that we'd land the next morning at about 9 a.m. so that the ships would have a full day of light to pick me up. And the search aircraft found him. They were able to follow him even though there was rain. He put out a 700-foot nylon drag line weighing 100 pounds to hold the balloon relatively stationary, and then he converted the gondola to a boat by installing rudders and checking to see that everything was seaworthy. Then he valved the balloon down close to the water. When I was about 4 feet off, he said, I pulled the rip panel partially so that the balloon would start losing helium and wouldn't be floating off by itself. After he disconnected the balloon, he watched it rise to about 5,000 feet before slowly coming down into the ocean. But despite his precautions, the balloon could not be recovered. 3 hours later, he was on the bridge of the Elizabeth Bolton radioing news of his rescue. And then the balloon sank. They were disappointed about that. He lost a lot. Let's jump right to our next story. Up to 230 people are dead of African fever. It's a mystery disease. This day in 1976, a mystery disease, a story out of Kenya, causing high fever and bleeding, has reportedly taken as many as 230 lives in Central Africa. It's under close study by African and World Health authorities. Sounds like the Ebola outbreak that's going on today. Radio Uganda Thursday claimed the disease, which broke out in the southern Sudan 2 weeks ago, is under control and has been contained. Nothing to see here. It quoted the South Sudanese regional minister for health as counting 12 people confirmed dead. It was not immediately clear whether the death count applied to the whole country or only that region. Reports from Sudan last weekend said more than 80 people had died of the disease there. The World Health Organization doctors reported the disease is marked by high fever, aches, vomiting, and bleeding from the nose, mouth, ears, and intestines. Sounds like something you don't want to get. A spokesman at WHO headquarters in Geneva said blood samples from Sudanese stricken by the disease are being examined in high-security laboratories in Europe. He said it would probably take several more days for the scientists to complete their analysis and isolate a virus. Isn't that something? Back in 1976. Well, we also found this ad in 1956 from Life magazine, October 8th, 1956, Life magazine. It's for a Bell system, solar battery, which converts the sun's rays into electricity. And it shows a gentleman there with a solar panel on the ground, just like you see outside today, hooked up to a battery. He's got a stick for some reason. I don't know why he's going to poke it with a stick. The Bell solar battery made of thin discs of specially treated silicon, an ingredient of common sand. It converts the sun's rays directly into usable amounts of electricity, simple and trouble-free. The storage batteries inside the solar battery store up its electricity for night use. And this was something they were advertising then, the dream of ages. It's been brought closer by the Bell System solar battery. First invented at the Bell Telephone Laboratories after long research and first announced in 1954. Since then, its efficiency has been doubled and its usefulness extended. There's still much to be done before the battery's possibilities in telephone use and other uses are fully developed, but a good and pioneering start has been made. Did not know they had solar panels available at that time. We also had an ad for Carnation Magic Crystals. It's a new instant that's delicious for drinking because this is the one with magic crystals. Only Carnation Instant is freshest, pasteurized, non-fat milk in actual tiny crystals. Magic crystals that burst into fresh milk flavor instantly, even in ice-cold water, ready to drink. Ready instantly for cereals, cooking, baking. No special recipes needed, rich in all the protein, calcium, and B vitamins of freshest whole milk. Carnation crystals. And in the ad it says, saves half on milk bills. In convenient 3-quart and economical 8-quart sizes, and it shows a young lad with a bow tie chugging down a glass of these Carnation Magic Crystals. If you've ever had them before, you probably know what I'm talking about. Here's an ad for Sportsman Shaving Cologne. And it's got a picture of a mallard duck and a fancy logo and a woman not wearing a lot of clothes. Man's Idea, rugged aftershave lotion with just enough sting to make you shiver a little. 150 proof, made to use every day or as often as you shave, $1 plus tax. A new Golden Glow. We had premium saltines. Interesting that the box has not changed too much from Nabisco. It's the freshest. Make the faucet test and take a few premium saltines out of the moisture-proof inner seal wax packet. Reclose and hold under the faucet. Crackers come out snapping crisp. Now, we all know you can't really hold a strip of saltines under the tap and expect them not to absorb water, but that was the marketing that they tried, the little wax packages. We found an ad for French's Natural Feeding Diet for parakeets. Apparently birds were really big then. Parakeets, like children, need something more than affection. Wholesome foods that also taste good are vital too. French's Parakeet Treat is a balanced mixture of favorite seeds enriched with extra vitamins, wheat germ, and yeast. It's one of the basic 5 foods of French's Natural Feeding Diet, the only complete diet scientifically prepared to give your parakeet all the benefits of the foods that wild birds deserve. just what you need to keep your parakeet happy. A great ad from Domino Sugar shows a lady here. No more artificial sweeteners for me, I know. Domino Sugar is low in calories and high in energy. They have a picture of 3 teaspoons of Domino Sugar and a pear down below it. And it says, which is less fattening? 3 teaspoons of Domino Sugar or 1 fresh pear? And you know it's the sugar is less fattening. Nutritionists know there's no need to go on a sugar-starved diet in order to keep weight down. In fact, it can be actually harmful to deny yourself the energy of Domino Sugar. And yet there are only 18 calories in a teaspoon of Domino Sugar. That's fewer than are found in many reducing diet foods such as pears, grapefruit, and tomatoes. Just as these foods are famous for their health values, in a well-balanced diet, Domino Sugar helps supply the quick food energy you need every day for good health. So don't deny yourself the delicious extra flavor Domino Sugar adds to every meal. And who hasn't, dipped the spoon into the Domino Sugar box and had 2 or 3 teaspoons of sugar just to help keep your weight down the modern way? And they've got a 5-pound bag of Domino pure cane sugar, low in calories, high in energy, right on the bag there, so you know it's true. Products of the American Sugar Refining Company. You didn't know sugar could be refined, did you? They also found an ad for a Motorola remote control. A tap of the button at the set or across the room in Motorola TV changes channels, brings in the next one instantly and silently with perfect picture and sound. Another Motorola exclusive, new, all-transistor wireless remote control. You can change TV channels from your easy chair without wires or flashing lights. Merely tap the new transit tuner and change channels perfectly from clear across the room. It's another Motorola transistor miracle. Try it today. This was in 1956, and the remote just has 1 button on it. Certainly a lot easier to use than the ones we have today. Way too many buttons. How about one more ad here? Something golden happens. Golden crispiness you've never gotten with any other shortening. Fluffo. Fluffo. Golden Fluffo. I don't remember Golden Fluffo. Pure shortening. Eat, it's not a table spread. Golden yellow from pure, wholesome keratin. No other kind of shortening you've ever used, whether vegetable or lard, can match the results Golden Fluffo gives you. You've never in your life served such crisp, light, golden brown fried foods, such tender, flaky, golden brown pies. Golden Fluffo, that's what we should all be cooking with. Try Golden Fluffo. How can you possibly miss? It doesn't go dark and grainy after a few reuses. You can use it indefinitely, just add more when needed. Foods are fried right and light in Fluffo. They give you that digestible golden brown crispiness you look for every single time. I like the fact you can reuse it and just add more. Well, let's look at our main mammal of the moment, the possum. I saw one when I was out hoofing along the road early in the morning the other day. Heard the rustle in the bushes, and here he comes out on the road. They haven't always been native to Maine. They've extended their range up the interstate. Didelphis virginiana. Other common names are the Virginia possum. It's a traditionally southern mammal, expanding its range north. It lives in open woodlands and forest edges with a preference for habitat with streams, diverse plants, and many den sites, such as hollow logs, and it tolerates suburban and urban areas. It eats fruits, worms, insects, eggs, and anything edible. I'm glad it didn't eat me. It's just a little guy. 2-foot-long marsupial about the size of a house cat. It has white fur with longer gray hairs, a long, scaly, prehensile tail, a long snout with 50 teeth, and ears that often show signs of frostbite. We should make hats for possums. When cornered, the possum falls into a death-like state and playing possum. Possums are known to be immune to snake venom, and they rarely get rabies. So if you do get a bite, it's not going to be rabies. Mostly nocturnal, they mate in late winter, and 7 to 9 young are born in March, spending the first 2 months in mom's pouch. Possum are the only marsupial in the U.S. All right, last time we didn't do the weather forecast, which is horrible. I feel so bad about that. The National Weather Service forecast for today, Saturday, October 8th, is partly sunny, then gradually becoming sunny with a high near 56, so kind of a cool day. Northwest winds 5 to 10 miles per hour, and for tonight, patchy frost after 2 a.m., otherwise mostly clear with a low around 35 degrees. Yeah. And for Sunday, patchy frost before the 8 a.m. in the morning, otherwise mostly sunny with a high near 57. Light southwest wind, but then gusting in the afternoon, increasing up to about 20 miles per hour. For Columbus Day, mostly sunny with a high near 56. That is our podcast for today. Until next time, this is Downeast Mike wishing you and your loved ones a day that is full of grace, love, and kindness. We'll see you.
Don't feel sorry for me. I'm just a seal on the rocks in Maine. Some say I'm sick because I've got fish on my brain. Here comes the shark. Oh, he's a biter for sure. I've got faith, but I can swim. I can swim forevermore. Well, there's fish and there's fish, but there's always a cold dish. And if you throw me a tin, oh, I know that I'll dig in, 'cause I'm a seal on the coast of Maine. I'm a seal. Oh God, here comes the shark. Oh, he's a biter for sure. But I've got faith, and I can swim further than the shark. I'm just a seal on the rocks. I'm not your snack. Don't worry, the dolphins have my back.